Who can the New York Mets sign to replace Aaron Loup next season? I'll discuss that on today's episode of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. For those of you who don't know, I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at FinkelsteinRyan. You can also find some of my writing about the Mets at justbaseball.com. So on today's show, we're going to go through some left-handed relievers on the market the Mets could target to replace Aaron Loup. And when it comes to trying to replace a reliever that had an ERA under 1, it's a little bit hard to find that arm just sitting there waiting for free agency that's going to come in and do exactly what Loup just did. Because Loup just put together an improbable season with the Mets. He gets to cash in on a very nice 2-year deal with the Los Angeles Angels. What was that deal? Was this $17 million deal. The Mets had a lot going on prior to the lockout, and Loup signed that deal early. Maybe the Mets didn't have time to match or weren't offered that opportunity to match, or they decided that they weren't ready to spend that money on Loup and they still had other needs, and they felt like the reliever market was something they could address a little bit later down the line. And it certainly is a market that still has plenty of intriguing arms, but there's really one that stands out above the rest. If you really want to sign a left-handed reliever that can fill that void left by Loup, there's really only one name, and that's Andrew Chafin. Now, this is a guy with a great mustache and a great personality that I think Mets fans would absolutely love. He's 31 years old, coming off a career year, had a really nice season, the sub-2 ERA, started off pitching with the Cubs, then ended up on the Oakland Athletics. But I want to take you back a bit when it comes to Chafin. This has been one of the more consistent relievers in baseball, but he didn't start off as a relief pitcher. He was a starting pitcher, drafted in the first round by the Arizona Diamondbacks in 2011, made his debut as a starter in 2014, but was converted to be a reliever in 2015. That first season as a reliever, he pitches to a 2.76 ERA across 75 innings, had a down year in 2016, but then bounced back in 2017, pitching to a 3.51 ERA, had 3 seasons like that with the sub-3.5 ERA, really solid pitcher overall, ended up spending parts of 7 seasons with the Diamondbacks, had a 3.68 ERA there with a 1.32 whip and a strikeout per 9 rate of 9.5. So a good strikeout pitcher, really solid. 2020 rolls around. He actually struggled with the Diamondbacks, ended up getting traded to the Cubs at the deadline in that 2020 season. Showed some nice signs with the Cubs down the stretch, didn't pitch a ton, but no one pitched a ton in 2020. He re-signs with the Cubs on a $2.25 million deal with a mutual option for the 2022 season. Goes out, pitches great with the Cubs, 2.06 ERA in 43 appearances, 37 strikeouts, and 39 and a third innings pitched. Gets traded to Oakland, continues his success, had a 1.53 ERA there. Similar strikeout rates, similar numbers really across the board between both stops, which shows you his consistency, and overall pitch to a 1.83 ERA. That is going to get you a nice penny on the market. So he declined that mutual option that would have paid him just north of the $5 million. And now he's going to be looking to get something closer to what Aaron Loup got, that 2-year, $17 million deal. Maybe it comes in a tick below that, maybe 2 for 15. We'll see what he gets, but he certainly is worth it. He is right now the top left-handed reliever on the market. There's going to be a ton of teams, I would imagine, that are vying for his services, but this is the number one reliever target, I think, on the board right now for me. If not him, maybe Ryan Tepera is the other one, both of them pitching with the Cubs this past season. I just think Chafin really does fit in nicely with the Mets bullpen right now. You have Edwin Diaz and Trevor May in the back end. Chafin can slide right in there. We had that whole podcast last week where I went through all of the Mets, options in the pen, and I think if you look right now, they have two real lockdown guys at the back end that I just mentioned. And then you have three guys that have that potential in Seth Lugo, Miguel Castro, and Drew Smith, but all of them are right-handed. So Chafin would come in and be that really nice complement. What he does well is he has an unbelievable slider, particularly this past season. That pitch had a whiff rate or whiff percentage against of 54.6%. That means over half the time a batter tried to swing at that slider, they swung through it. They could not touch that pitch. And if you watch highlights, what he does really well, what makes him so dangerous is all of his pitches have similar movements. They all come, and he's got a fastball, a sinker, and a slider. They all have a similar trajectory coming out of the hands. It's hard to pick up which offering is coming. That fastball, obviously a little bit more straight, doesn't have a ton of break, really jumps on batters. He really throws that pitch up in the zone, gets a lot of strikeouts that way, kind of showing some velocity, even though it's only 93. When you pair that with a slider that comes in the low 80s, that pitch can jump on you. You have the sinker, which gives you a little bit more break to a little more bite than that fastball. And then the slider, which almost looks like a tight curveball, that pitch looks very similar to the sinker, but just drops off the table. 42.1 inches of vertical drop. It doesn't move a lot horizontally. It's a really tight, just dipping pitch that batters just had no chance with this past season. So I think that is certainly going to hold up that slider. There's no reason to expect him to regress next season. He's a good bet. And I think when you're looking at the market and you're trying to find an Aaron Loup replacement, as I said, he's really the only option I see out there that I have confidence in going into next season, that he can be a dynamic wipeout reliever, can get strikeouts, can be trusted, can throw strikes, could be that late inning reliever, and can be a big weapon to go against the lefties in this division. We're not sure if Freddie Freeman will return, although the Braves are smart at all, they're going to re-sign him. You still have Juan Soto, though. You still have a lot of guys you're going to have to get out, and Bryce Harper as well, the reigning MVP. So just those two guys alone, you want to have a Chafin type in your bullpen. I think he makes a ton of sense. And honestly, if we're really looking at the market and we're reading the tea leaves from the reporting by Andy Martino last week, if the Mets are not going to sign another big ticket position player, and you don't expect them to maybe spend on a Carlos Rodon if they aren't trying to go into that luxury bin of shopping anymore, maybe Chafin is the free agent that should be most prioritized because he fills the greatest need. But if it's not Chafin, there is another couple of left-handed relievers that I think make a lot of sense, and one of them would be reuniting with Brad Hand. He didn't have the best season in 2021, but he has a great track record, and he pitched pretty well for the Mets. I'll talk about Hand a little bit more in just a minute. It's the new year, so that means New Year's resolutions. And if yours is about getting fit or eating healthier, make sure you include Built Bar in your plan. Built Bar is the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. It'll make it so much easier to stick to your resolution because Built Bars taste so good, you'll want to eat them. Unlike other protein bars that can be chalky or waxy, Built Bars are soft and easy to chew, and they come covered in 100% chocolate. Not to mention, there's so many different flavors to choose from, whether it's the coconut almond bar, peanut butter brownie, raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, mint brownie, and many more. In fact, Built is always coming out with new limited time flavors, so check them out often to see what's new. If you want to try Built Bar today, go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you're going to get 15% off your next order. Again, that's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. This episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders their parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry, when you can just do it yourself with your own computer at rockauto.com, or even just with your phone? Why choose to spend 30%, 50%, maybe even 100% more for the exact same auto parts at a chain store or new car dealership, when you can just go to a family business like Rock Auto that has been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years? Rock Auto's prices are reliably low for every customer, You can explore their easy-to-use website today. Find the solution to your auto parts needs. All you have to do is go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck, right locked on in there. How'd you hear about us box? So they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. So Brad Hand did not have the best 2021 season. It's never great when you pitch for three teams because generally that means that you were cut at least once, as Brad Hand was. Although you look at his season as a whole, and it was really just a terrible stop in Toronto because during the first part of the season with the Nationals, he pitched to a 3.59 ERA, had 21 saves in 42 and two-thirds innings pitched. He was their closer, did the job. He wasn't outstanding. He wasn't his dominant all-star self, but he was still a quality reliever. Gets traded to the Blue Jays and was a train wreck. A 7.27 ERA, ended up getting DFA'd, and this was after the deadline where he could get picked up from another team and still play in the playoffs. He gets DFA'd in August, ends up signing with the Mets, pitches well, had a 2.70 ERA across his 16 games pitched with them. And I just look at the market right now, and if it's not Chafin, it should probably be Brad Hand because not only does he have the potential with a wipeout slider, which wasn't quite as dominant this past year, but could certainly be again, he also has the closing experience to step in for an Edwin Diaz. So that is another positive the Mets can draw from. If they liked Brad Hand during his time here, maybe that's why they were so willing to let Aaron Loup go on because maybe they felt like they could get a bounce back season from Brad Hand at a discount as opposed to paying Aaron Loup off the career year. If you look at Brad Hand's career numbers, a 3.68 ERA, 126 games saved, he was really dynamic from 2017 on, maybe even 2016 was when it started, but 2017 was his first All-Star season. This past year was the first time since then that he wasn't an All-Star reliever. So that shows you how dynamic he can be at his best. This past year, the whiff percentage against his slider dropped significantly, down to 27.9%. Now, he has generally lived in the 40% or at 40% or greater when it comes to the whiff percentage on his slider. So that shows you why he wasn't as effective, wasn't striking out as many batters, and was walking a lot more. Really, if you just look at the numbers, what happened was pretty clear. Batters were identifying the slider and spitting on it. So as they're taking that pitch, they're getting into good counts, they're drawing walks. When they get into good counts where Brad Hand is behind, they're able to square him up. The question is that going to repeat itself going into next year? It's tough. There's no telling exactly how he's going to pitch, but I do think that the reliever market is very volatile, and at times bet on someone to have a bounce back. Sometimes that's better than signing the guy off the career, signing Aaron Loup when he just pitched to a sub-1 ERA and expecting him to do that again and to pitch up to that level when he's on this new contract, and it sets expectations at a point where he might not be able to meet them. Whereas Brad Hand has just lowered expectations, and sometimes one off year does not make the reliever suddenly crumble. They can just bounce back and have a solid season because a couple bad outings for a relief pitcher really changes the entire course of their season. So Brad Hand has a couple outings where teams are identifying his slider, they're laying off it, they're drawing walks, they're getting into good counts, they're hitting off them, they're teeing off, they just completely shatter his confidence, his ERA skyrockets, and then he is playing a game of catch up the rest of the season on an uphill battle. Maybe he comes out next year with the Mets. He's confident. He's in a place he already was. He bounces back and has a great year. You can probably sign him on a one-year deal. It's not going to cost you a ton. And even though Brad Hand has been around forever, he's not as old as you would think he is. He'll turn 32 next season. I feel like he has the stature of someone who's been around the block so long that people think he's in his mid-30s, but that's not the case. I don't think that his stuff is completely diminished. I don't think that there is not a chance here that he'll bounce back. In fact, I think there's a pretty solid chance that he will bounce back. So under that context, with the right contract, I think Brad Hand makes a lot of sense. And really, I like Brad Hand a lot if he's the second best reliever you add. If you go out and you get Ryan Tepera and then you bring back Brad Hand, well, that is a 1-2 punch you're bringing into a bullpen that's pretty solid already that I think does take the Mets to that next level and really gives them a bullpen that can compete next year. I like Brad Hand a lot under that context. Again, if he's not the best reliever you sign, Andrew Chafin can be the best reliever the Mets can sign. They could sign Andrew Chafin and that be it. And I would be pretty comfortable going into next season with where the Mets are. But if they get Brad Hand and another elite back end reliever, I feel pretty good about the Mets bullpen heading into next year. But there's a couple other options that I think are intriguing as well. Maybe not as intriguing as Hand with the closer experience or Chafin coming off the great year, but still pitchers that I think can have a lot of success with the Mets next season. I'll discuss them in just a minute. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action for 2022. New year, new updated desktop and mobile website. So sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit just by using our promo code Locked On. From football, basketball, hockey, boxing, and UFC, right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for 2022. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to wager on all your favorite sports. Bet online, where the game starts. All right, so as we try to replace Aaron Loup in the Mets bullpen, we've already gone through the A option, the B option. Now let's get to the C options. Guys that could fill the role of a left-handed reliever in the pen, but I wouldn't necessarily put them in the role that Loup had last season of being a late inning, high leverage reliever for the Mets. Although Tony Watson, the first name we're going to talk about, does have a fair bit of experience in high leverage situations because he holds a major league record for the most holds in MLB history, 232 holds. Now, it's not as sexy as 232 saves, right? But he's pitching the seventh and the eighth a lot. That's good. He has a career 2.90 ERA. Now, this past season wasn't his best. He really struggled at the start with the Angels, pitching to a 4.64 ERA. His walk per nine was at 3.8 with the Angels. And then he signs in one of the new pitching factories in baseball, a place where pitchers go and they can rehab their careers. That is San Francisco with the Giants. Faranzati and whatever analytics department he has established has just found a way to mine these diamonds in the rough when it comes to pitchers and turn them into, Kevin Gausman signing this huge contract this past season and getting a reliever like Tony Watson, who has had a lot of success in his career, who was struggling, identifying that, for whatever reason, he's walking a lot of batters. They fixed that. His walk per nine went from 3.8 to 1.5. And as a result of that, his ERA, which was again at 4.64 with the Angels, was 2.96 with the Giants. He had 0.78 whip. So he no longer was walking a ton of batters. He was limiting the hard contact, limiting hits, and getting by and getting outs for them. You look at some of the advanced metrics on Tony Watson. Hard hit percentage in the 95th percentile around baseball. Does not get knocked around. Chase rate, 89th percentile around baseball. Batters seem to swing at some of his junk out there. He's able to get some strikes on pitches that he shouldn't. His expected ERA of 3.37 was in the 79th percentile. That is foreshadowing promising performance in the future. You look at his whiff percentage on his slider, 41.7%. So another left-handed reliever with a very good slider. That's what you want here. Now, he primarily uses that weapon against lefties, and the batting average against his slider this past season was below 100 at just 98 with a 139 on base percentage and a 122 slugging. So a dominant pitch. You look at that, no reason why even at 37 that slider can't still be effective. I like him as an option. This is not someone that's going to break the bank. Again, I think that if Tony Watson was quote unquote replacing Aaron Loup, you'd really want to have a Ryan Tepera or somebody else that you're going to sign when it comes to your right-handed reliever that is going to help that back end of the pen. And Watson could be just a lefty arm that you can slide into your bullpen that can go up against the Harpers, the Sotos of the world. Use that slider and hopefully get some good outs for you. Now, The last guy is a personal favorite of mine. We had a podcast with Jordan Grossman probably about a month ago now. We were identifying a bargain free agents, I believe, that the Mets could go after that we liked. And Chasen Shreve was one of my nominees. Chasen Shreve is a pitcher that was obviously on the 2020 Mets. You may remember his splitter is a dynamic weapon. And with the Mets, he had a strikeout rate of 33.3%. The whiff percentage on that splitter was over 50% in 2020. It was a shortened season, but he played a vital role in that bullpen, would get multiple innings a lot of times when he was called on. I really like Chasen Shreve, and that's not only because he was the first guest or major league player that was a guest on this show. Gave me a couple, a solid, 45-minute conversation during the pandemic. It was one of my more enjoyable episodes during that time when it was hard to come up with things to talk about. It's a really good dude. So I want to see him back. I have bias there, obviously, because I can hit him up and try to get him back on the show. But moreover, I really do think he's a good pitcher that was maximized with Jeremy Hefner. And I'd like to see the two of them reunite. I like to see him back in that Mets bullpen. And I think his stuff can once again play up. That splitter can be a real weapon for him. I think he could get good outs for the Mets. I think he'd also fill a different role from Aaron Loup, being that he could go out and get, 2 innings for you. We saw him do that a lot in 2020. And this past year with the Pirates, while his stuff was nowhere near as dominant, he was not getting the same strikeouts. His strikeout rate dropped from 33.3% to 19.1%. He still pitched to a 3.20 ERA. So he was still getting guys out. He was still limiting runs. I like him a lot as a fit in this Mets bullpen, but it would also be under that context, again, of getting a much better option. That's a Ryan Tepera or others to come in and be another late inning reliever. And that is where I will leave you today, because on tomorrow's show, I will talk about Ryan Tepera, maybe Kenley Jansen, and some of the other right-handed relievers on the market the Mets could target to try to not only fill the void that Aaron Loup has left, but give the Mets another real late inning option to pair with Trevor May and Edwin Diaz, along with the likes of Seth Lugo, Miguel Castro, and Drew Smith. Anyway, though, that will be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Bets. We are Super Bowl bound. The NFL playoffs has reached its apex. Locked On Bets has you covered, though, for everything, not just the NFL, basketball, when we're in baseball season. They will give you the best daily gambling advice. So follow Locked On Bets wherever you get podcasts.